Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's top 10 best and worst one-off or minor aliens from Star Trek the original series. So this video is a Patreon requested video requested by patron Norman Buchwald. So in this video I will name my favorite and least favorite aliens from Star Trek the original series who only really appeared in one episode or who are one-offs or minor aliens. The ones I thought worked the best and the ones I thought worked the least, who were sort of most or least interesting and sort of caught my attention. Anyway, I'll go ahead and start with my worst list, starting with which I believe were the worst recurring, or one-off, not recurring, but one-off minor aliens that appeared in Star Trek the original series. We will start with my number 5, which is the Elasians, I believe is how they're pronounced. Basically, the alien species from Elan of Troyes, who are apparently the women's tears can drive a man to go mad and madly in love with them, and they were definitely in love with them for the rest of their lives, except Kirk managed to shave it off because he was already in love with the Enterprise, which is kind of dumb. I don't buy that. How effective are these tears, and how come nobody warned him about these tears? And these aliens just come off as sort of rough, dumb, and entitled anyway, so I don't really care about them. They look just like humans. So, and plus the Elan character was extremely annoying anyway, so don't care. Anyway, next on my worst list for one-off aliens, we'll get to my number 4, which is the Tholians, or the Children of Vol from the episode The Apple. I jokingly refer to these aliens as sunburnt Californians because the makeup on these aliens was quite dumb, and they sort of hired a very, very attractive people and made them scantily clad. Reminded me of old 60s or 70s episodes when they went on vacation and went surfing and stuff. And yet these aliens were really naive, and like saw Chekhov making out with his girlfriend, and they're like, oh, what is this kissing thing? Oh, that is not allowed. We must follow this supercomputer computer that looks like a giant lizard. Like, what the fuck is that? I don't know, and I don't care. And Kirk just leaves them to die anyway because they have no way of feeding themselves without the supercomputer that Kirk destroyed. So good job for him, I guess. Anyway, I don't really care about them. So next on my list is my number 3, the Romans from Bread and Circuses. So this is an alien world on an alien planet light years away, like vast distances through space. Like if we were traveling there now with real life technology, it would take us centuries upon centuries upon centuries to get there, maybe thousands of years, and we travel to this distant planet, and there's fucking humans who are Romans, and they have a society that's exactly like 20th century Earth, except it's the Roman Empire. Okay, that's just so dumb. That is so dumb. Not only do these aliens look like humans, they are humans. It's anyway. Next we'll get into my number 2, which is the Ornithori life forms, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So these are the 2 dumbass aliens we met in the really bad episode Cat's Paw, and dealt with. First of all, yeah, these 2 aliens in human form were just doing dumb things, and they had like these powers to brainwash people, and yet they couldn't understand the basic concepts of humanity, and their motivations didn't make any sense. And they just one woman turned herself into a giant cat, and then when we saw them in their true forms, they just looked like these straw puppet things that made out of pipe cleaners. I guess they were going I know, making fun of the special effects or the makeup or stuff from the original series is low-hanging fruit, but I think this looked terrible even for the year it came out. Like, this just looks so bad. And these aliens are dumb, and I don't care about them. So, next we'll get into my number one least favorite, worst alien one-off alien from Star Trek, the original series. And that's Jack the Ripper, who goes by many names, from Wolf in the Fold. First of all, having Jack the Ripper being an alien energy being that travels around the planets killing women is dumb. That's stupid. You don't need a supernatural explanation for who Jack the Ripper was. He was simply an aristocrat who paid off a lot of high lords to not investigate him because it was a very corrupt time. And the whole way it was portrayed in this episode by being, I'm gonna kill you, was so dumb. And I really didn't buy it, and I really didn't buy this whole murder mystery, and I didn't buy that he was pretending to be that one administrator dude on the planet, and then turned into this weird energy being that was infesting the Enterprise. It's all a bunch of ludicrous nonsense. So that makes him my number one least favorite one-off alien in the original series. So now that's out of the way, let me get into my best list, my top 10 best one-off or minor aliens from Star Trek, the original series. And we'll start with my number 10. Now, we'll start with my number 10 and my number 9, who are the aliens that are essentially just humans. They look like humans. They're the best of them. Later I'll get into when the original series actually went beyond simply aliens that look just like humans and did something original with them. And so all of those on my list will favor. However, there's a couple of them that were just basically humans that I actually thought was interesting. So they will make my number 10 and my number 9. So we'll start with my number 10. The Adrianas, I believe that they're called Adrianas, from the episode The Cloud Minders, which was a very interesting, presented a very unique society where, all the rich and elite lived in these cities in the clouds where they wanted for nothing and had beautiful art, while the poor people struggled down in the mines to mine all the ores that made their luxurious life possible while they could not participate in this. And they seemed an enlightened people, but they just didn't understand this class divide, which of course was a huge analogy for the class divide that exists in our modern day society, and it was a really great analogy. And this one episode did a really good job of fleshing out these aliens and making them seem very realistic, even though again they just look like humans. So next is my number 9, the other human-like race on my list, which are the Arminians, I believe they're called, from the episode A Taste of Armageddon. Another very interesting concept that showed this world that was at war with a neighboring colony, and they conducted all their war entirely through theoretical computers, where if there was a hit, people would have to just report to disintegration chambers to die, rather than having a bloody war with destroying their culture and cities and buildings. But this was just a clean way to elongate this war and make people more comfortable with war, which is something They should not be, because war is a terrible thing that should be avoided at all costs. And Kirk came by and reminded them of this. And again, it was a great analogy for contemporary times. In fact, I dare say it's even more relevant now than it was in the 60s when this episode was made. And yeah, so this was a very interesting alien species, even though they were essentially just human beings. Anyway, so now we'll leave that behind and get into the more interesting aliens, and we'll start with number 8, the Tribbles. Now, you might be surprised to have the Tribbles on the list, because I think The Trouble with Tribbles is one of the most overrated episodes of all time. In fact, it's only second to Trials and Tribulations, which is even more overrated. But the Tribbles themselves is an interesting concept, and I like particularly how they're portrayed here as a species native to a planet with many predators. They just produce very fast in order for maintain the natural balance of this of this particular planet. But when they're removed from that environment, they go unchecked and they mass produce like crazy and become a pest, which is a very interesting concept. And also they throw in the fact that they look cute and they purr and they go weird, and people kind of like, oh, aren't they cute, and not realizing the economic menace that they actually are. And that's an interesting commentary. So I actually do kind of like the Tribbles. So next on my list is my number 7, the Medusans. I always thought this was the Is There in Truth No Beauty was a boring episode, and I didn't really care about the Medusans. But when I think about them more, particularly the way the episode treats them, how they keep saying they're ugly. Oh, they're so ugly, they make you go mad. They're not ugly. It's just different. Their body chemistry is just a different makeup. So if human beings look at them, they go insane. So they have to sort of hide their appearance, but they still want they're still nice people, and they want cordial relations with the Federation. And that's a very interesting concept, and it's very different from having just people who just look like normal human beings, or paint them red and put antlers on their heads. Having an actual like weird energy being that drives you insane just by looking at them. Interesting concept, definitely. And of course this was brought up more in Prodigy, but for this show they were just a one-off because they were only in this episode. So next we get into my number 6, which is the Companion from the episode Metamorphosis. Again, this was just an energy being that they didn't realize at first how exactly to communicate with. Kirk came up with a way to tie in the universal translator and trying to communicate with this very unique energy being that formed an attachment with Zephyr Cochrane, where it kept saying, the man must continue. And so that's a very interesting concept, and it was used in an interesting way. Of course, she ended up merging with the woman who was dying, and so would live out a normal lifespan as a human being. But interesting concept, definitely. So next we'll get into my number 5, which is the Horta from Devil in the Dark. Of course, this is a silicon-based life form. Different than the Kelvins I could have mentioned from the episode Savage Curtain, who was also sort of a silicon-based life form, but that episode was problematic and really sucked, so I'm not really going to mention them. I'm going to mention the Horta, who are definitely more interesting, because at first, they're such a weird, unusual concept, just their whole existence, that at first the Starfleet officers, the miners that went to that colony, didn't even recognize them as a life form, because they're so different. But eventually, they found a way to communicate and live in peace with them. And it was just a definitely very fascinating concept. So next we'll get into my number 4, the Talosians from the Cage in the Menagerie. And of course they did make an appearance later on in Discovery, but I'm only focusing on the original series here. Where they're an alien race who masters the power of illusion and create illusions so real that they can do whatever they want and trick people to do whatever they want. But their powers of mind control sort of destroyed their society, and they're looking for human beings to sort of save them. But they're naturally very manipulative with their powers or whatever. So yeah, definitely very interesting concept. So next we'll get into my number 3, which are the Kelvins. Not to be confused with the Kelvin timeline, but the Kelvins from the episode By Any Other Name. Definitely a really interesting concept, because even though they're in humanoid form in this episode, their original form is said to be like gigantic tentacles and whatnot, and very strange and cumbersome, which is why they had to take on human form to exist in human ships. And their technology is super advanced, but they insist on conquering rather than making peace. But Kirk is able to use their new human sensations to make them think more like the Federation would and make peace with them. And of course, Scotty gets one really drunk, obviously. So yes, I thought the Kelvins were indeed a very interesting alien race. So next we'll get into my number 2, Turlane, which I guess he's an individual, but I guess I could say Turlane's species, because we merely meet it through him, who is he's very similar to Q. A lot of people say he's the prototype for Q, but I don't think he is a Q. I think he's a specific species who is very omniscient and has powers to sort of godlike powers to do whatever he wants. But I think there is a limitation to his powers, because when Kirk blew up his mirror, it did damage his powers, and he got very angry over it. And of course we find out he's just a wee little tyke. He's just a little kid, and he didn't really understand the nuance of things, and his parents come by and punish him and apologize to Kirk. But it is interesting to have an alien species so advanced that it's kind of like the way kids would treat pets, the little animals. In fact, their parents even refer to Kirk and his crew as their pets. And how that would be on that side. So very fascinating, very interesting concept. So that is my number 2. So now we'll get into my number 1 favorite one-off aliens from Star Trek the original series, and they are the Tholians, of course. Now the Tholians, of course, are name dropped a lot in later incarnations of Star Trek, and we do see them again in Star Trek Enterprise. But they appear in a lot of B canon too. But really, this is the only time they appeared in the original series. And again, they were a very interesting concept, having this weird glowing alien thing. Apparently it was later explained that they live in a extreme heat, and for them to go, I am Commander Laxique, it was very fascinating. And their ships, of course, are very bizarre, and they come together and they form this energy web to trap other ships. A very interesting concept. I love the Tholians. I wish that Star Trek did more with them. I wish they became recurring aliens, instead of the Klingons or the Ramas, or at least in addition to them. And I would have loved to see more of them, and it's not too late. God damn it, Strange New Worlds needs to do Tholians. We need to see Tholians. They're so interesting. I do definitely want to find out more about them. So, that's it. That's it for my favorite and least favorite one-off aliens from Star Trek the original series. Thank you so much for watching this video. Thanks so much for Norman Buckwald for requesting this video. And I do have to give a shout out for all those who support me on Patreon. It is very much appreciated. It does help the channel to keep going, to thrive. So we have Francisco Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky Menegester, Joel Valza, Alessandro Miguelcio, Norman Buckwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, Allison Fordyce, and Brandon Neal House. Thank you all so very much for your support, and if you would like to support me on Patreon, I would be very much appreciated. Even $1 a month gets you access to Patreon-only videos. However, if you want to donate $10 or more, you can request videos like this for me to do, and I shall do them. So even if you can't support me on Patreon, be sure to check out my channel, subscribe, leave a like. I am going to be covering Star Trek The Next Generation every episode pretty soon, as well as covering Strange New Worlds week to week. So be sure to check out my channel for that and many more videos, and thanks so much for watching.